Come on, let's live our lives in a way that's worth telling stories about. Let's go after a dream that's destined to fail without divine intervention.
Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we can make. We long to see the body of Christ look like Jesus. I'm your host, Johnson. You know, some things grow slowly, their roots deepening beneath the surface long before anyone notices the fruit. In this episode, I talk with pastor and author Mark Batterson about his new book, Gradually Then Suddenly, a call to dream big, start small, and stay faithful long enough to see a legacy take root. We talk about the beauty of long obedience, how imagination is part of the image of God, and why every overnight success is really 20 years in the making. Mark shares stories from his journey as a pastor in Washington, D.C., turning a crack house into a coffee house, a dream into a citywide ministry, and faith into a generational vision. Together, we explore how to live in the tension between God's timing and our efforts, how to hold a long view of transformation, and how to live a life worth telling stories about. Join us as we learn to dream God-sized dreams, practice patient faith, and play the long game of love and legacy. Here is my conversation with Mark Batterson. Mark, welcome to Shifting Culture. So excited to have you on. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, it's a joy and privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Gradually Then Suddenly, your new book. And then one of the things you talk about there is long vision and long obedience equals a long legacy. So I want to go back all the way back into your high school days, basketball playing days, as you were at the free throw line, you were squinting, and your basketball coach said, "Hey, I think you might have some vision problems." And we talk about some vision, but I know that coaches have instilled vision in me that have stuck with me long term. What did you learn on the court that has stuck with you, that has provided some vision for you long term?
Wow, I love that question. Why not start on the court? And I have to make a confession, Joshua. My nickname in college was the black hole because if you passed me the ball, you weren't getting it back. I never saw a shot. I like shooting the basketball, but I think one of the things you learn is you're only as good as the players around you. The whole is more than the sum of the parts, and I think that's just true in life. Like, it is not a solo sport. So when you're on the court, like, it's everybody, blood, sweat, and tears towards that common goal, and how to be a good teammate, and then how to face failure or a loss and pick yourself back up and figure out how to practice harder and smarter. And so it's crazy. I mean, I think most of the life lessons that have translated into both as a writer and a pastor really come from the locker room, from the court, from the practice field.
Yeah, it's true. And I found that in my own life as a player, as a coach, just walking through life, there's so many great discipleship lessons. And what does it look like to live well? You know, you have your dream hat on, you got your dream collective hoodie on. It's all about the dream. So if we have dreams in our life, and you love to both have God-sized dreams, but then help others find their God-sized dreams as well. When did that shift happen for you, that you realized that you were somebody that can instill some God-sized dreams into people, help people imagine what God is doing and where he's going and how to join him and what he's doing on this earth?
Wow. I think, all of us are dreamers in the sense that imagination is part of the Imago Dei. So I think, any little kid, stick is a lightsaber. And if they're even out shooting hoops, since we're on the basketball theme, you're shooting with, time running out to win a championship. Like, it's imagination, or this ability to envision the future, is so unique to us. Squirrels may hoard acorns for the winter, but they don't moonshot rockets. They don't build skyscrapers. Like, humankind is unique. And of course, everything is created twice, and maybe we'll come back to that idea because it's a key theme. But I've always been someone that just I really enjoy dreaming or imagining, whether it's architecture. And we have about 7 properties that are old properties that we have demoed and renovated. And so whether it's using imagination there or telling stories to my kids before bed, or even dreaming up a new book. There's just something about, I really enjoy the process of dreaming into the future, but it takes teamwork to make the dream work, which is an overused phrase, but it's absolutely true. Like you can, as a coach. So what sport have you coached, Joshua? Just out of
I coach college basketball. So I coach basketball and then junior high, I coach baseball and
Yeah,
volleyball.
yeah, yeah.
So.
So you need that whole team to be on the same
Yeah.
page. And so the dream is winning a championship, but then every player kind of has to internalize it. So I don't know. I think, yeah, the importance of dreams. Show me the size of your dream. I'll show you the size of your God. It's a stewardship issue. So I think it's always been something that is a little bit innate to me. The challenge is most of us kind of lose that ability to dream. We just get caught up in the 24/7 cycle of life.
Yeah, so let's get into some people who really may be at the beginning stages of dream. So to produce a long vision, that will take so much obedience and faithfulness over time, that will then have a legacy that's beyond you. So let's go in the beginning. How do we actually then move from the imagination stage into the, like, let's get it on paper stage and start to walk it out? What does that look like? That shift from imagination to actually the start of something?
Yeah. Well, first of all, if we do little things like they're big things, God will do big things like they're little things. So don't despise the day of small beginnings. Let's get painfully practical. I write a little bit about this idea of grand gestures, that you have to do something. Well, I'll give an example. I felt called to write books when I was 22, but I didn't write a book until I was 35. And so that was 13 years of a dream deferred. It wasn't until I leveraged my 35th birthday and turned it into a deadline. In other words, I'm not going to turn 35 without having a book to show for it. And I made that decision, Joshua, like 40 days out. So that did not leave much time, but it's kind of as simple as, when I ran a marathon years ago, it was just going on the Chicago Marathon website and actually paying a couple $100 to register for it. And once you do that, well, then now we're in. And even when I cast vision for us launching a second campus many, many, many years ago, I remember it's about going public. And in a message, I cast that vision, and it was kind of like, all right, there's no turning back now. So it's almost like you have to back yourself into a little bit of a corner. And so grand gestures come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. I mean, Jim Carrey wrote himself a check for $10 million. And in the memo, post dated it 10 years out. And sure enough, that grand gesture came true with a couple of movies. I think one of them being Dumb and Dumber. So you're saying there's a chance? Yes, I am.
That's good. There is a chance, since we're going there. A lot of this vision into reality. I'm just take the story of Abraham. God's telling him, through your family, there's going to be descendants more than you could count, and there will be the seed. So Jesus comes through the genealogy, the family of Abraham, and Jesus then, hey, we get everything, right?
Yep.
Death, reconciliation, redemption, renewal of all things. It's amazing. But from him, all he saw was his family, and it took a long time for him to even get a son and be
Yep.
obedient.
Yep.
And he died before anything was possible. How do we know, hey, this is a God-given dream. This is something that God promised He's going to do in my life. and we continue to walk it out. And it's not just for us. It could be for generations to come. But how do we walk that out? What give us some things. How does the story of Abraham help us out to think long
Yeah.
term?
Well, I I kinda employ what I call the crazy test, that it's gotta be crazy enough for God to be in it, and I'm having a little bit of fun with that, but by definition, a God-sized dream is gonna be beyond your ability, beyond your education, and beyond your resources. In other words, you can't do it. It's gonna necessitate some divine intervention. So, come on, let's live our lives in a way that's worth telling stories about. Let's go after a dream that's destined to fail without divine intervention. So I think it has to be kind of crazy enough, big enough. And a couple named Abraham and Sarah having a baby at 190 respectively is pretty crazy. So it requires some divine intervention. So I tend to look at things like, instead of just doing things that are kind of on the outskirts of my human ability, sign me up for something that is a little bit more impossible than that. Now, I think you have to be careful because generally speaking, there's going to be a compound interest. So, when I first started dreaming of writing books, I thought, man, what if I could write a book that would sell 1 million copies and, just kind of, that would be amazing. And well, first book sold 3,641 copies. Okay. So, like, reality check. But then that sixth book, The Circle Maker, not only sold 1 million, I think we're at three plus. And so it's where legacy comes into play, I think, that we tend to overestimate what we can do in a year or two, underestimate what God can do in 10 or 20. Legacy is not what you accomplish. Legacy is what others accomplish because of you. And so that's where I think, if a dream is selfish in nature, I honestly think it always short circuits. Like, it loses something. But if I have a dream that, kind of like John the Baptist, I must become less and you must become more, when it's not about your ego or paycheck, but it's this intrinsic, man, I really want to use the gift I have to glorify God. Then God has this way of taking 5 loaves, 2 fish, and turning it into a miracle for 5,000 people. So there's something in that equation that I think maybe answers the question you're asking.
Well, I think there's also something where people, it's not just about, my dream. So it has to be, if it's a God-sized dream, it has to be more than just one of us to accomplish this, right? It's not really all just about me and this dream. It's about all of us together. How do we start out on that trajectory? I've seen so many people that are concerned with legacy at the end of their life, and they're trying to control things so that they
Ah,
can have a say in something. But how do you set something up from the beginning when it's not just about what you want to control at the end, but it's about giving things away from the beginning to make it a God dream and not just
yeah.
a good idea from me?
Wow. Well, I'll make it personal. Many years ago, probably 2 decades ago, kinda came up with a list of 100 life goals. But when I went back and looked at them, I was a little surprised how selfish some of them were. And I made 2 changes. One is I added a relationship component to almost every dream. So instead of doing a triathlon, let me do a triathlon with one of my kids. Instead of swimming the Escape from Alcatraz by myself, let me do it with one of my kids. Instead of just going to the top of the Eiffel Tower, how about if I kiss my wife on the top of the Eiffel Tower? That's way better. So adding a relational element, and I say this so often, if it's not a win for you, it's not a win for me. Like, I really want to operate out of a win-win. Too many people have a zero-sum game mindset, And Joshua, even this as a coach, the greatest athletes aren't competing against the other team. They're always competing with themselves. Like they're trying to become the best version of themselves. And then the other thing I did with those life goals is instead of getting goals, I flipped it and set giving goals. Now, here's the reality. If you're going to give away X number of dollars, you probably are going to have to make a certain multiple of that. But it changes the motivation. And so, one of our goals, my wife and I, is to reverse tithes someday. And that would be living off of 10% and giving 90% because you don't take it with you. And so I think, there might be something very practical there as we're setting goals. Let's make sure, or as we're dreaming, let's make sure that we're adding value to other people, that it's a win for everybody. And it's kind of this rising tide floats all boats, so to speak.
But if you're in the boat and you're trying to get to the other side, a lot of times, if you want to actually swim from Alcatraz all the way back to the land, you're going to be in the middle of that water and you're going to try to look back. You can't see anything. You're going to try to look forward. You can't see anything. And you're like, what did I get myself into? I'm in the middle of the ocean and I don't know what I'm doing. And you just keep going and you keep going. So when we can't see like what's ahead, we can't see what's behind, and we're in the middle of it, the really messy middle.
Yeah.
What do we do to keep going? What do we do with putting one foot in front of the other? How does this work for us?
Yeah. Well, I might zoom out and kind of big picture, maybe even put my pastor hat on, because I like asking this question. What percentage of your thoughts and words, actions and reactions are a regurgitation of the news you're watching or the social media you're consuming? In other words, are you overly influenced by trending hashtags? Because if you are, you're going to trend towards groupthink. Popular opinion, peer pressure, political correctness are going to be the order of the day. Or what percentage of your thoughts and words, actions and reactions are a revelation you're getting from God's word? Like, I want to make sure that I'm taking my cues from scripture, which for me is the final authority in matters of faith and doctrine. So that's my epistemology in a nutshell, that I've given God veto power and I believe his word is inspired. So I'm going to try to live according to that word. So that's when you're in the middle of the mess, you really have to, well, there's probably a couple of other things. And this is thinking on the fly, and it's fun to think on the fly. You better make sure that you've got true north, that you understand that you have this internal compass, that I have certain convictions. For example, I want to be famous in my home. Well, it's hard to be famous in your home if you're never home. And so what I had to do years ago was establish boundaries that I'll only do 7 overnight speaking trips a year. Because if I do more than that, I'm going to be spread so thin that the most important people in my life will get the leftovers. And the problem with that is this: I have a definition of success. Success is when those who know you best respect you most, and that's my wife and my kids. So it's like when the compass needle is spinning and you're in the middle of the mess, you need to stay centered. And then I'd also say you better fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame. Like, I would say, keep on keeping on, keep calm and carry on. Like, so much of life and leadership, I don't care if we're talking about marriage or when a team loses a couple of games in a row and confidence is shaken. Like, man, you got to go back to basics. You got to go back to practicing the right things, doing the right things, the inputs, and then trusting those outcomes. So that would be kind of my initial take. And I would be interested, like, hearing what I just said, like what's going through your mind?
Yeah, it's convictions, but I think it's values for me. It's like what are the values, and those things are going to drive who I am, what I'm
Yeah.
doing, where I'm going. I think when you have either a monetary goal or like a building goal or something, you could steamroll so many people if values don't actually drive the day.
Yeah. Do you have like with the teams that you coach, do you occasionally have like a theme or a mantra or, like I wrote a book a few years ago called Win the Day. And truth be told, I mean, I got that title from a bunch of football programs that, they use that little mantra win the day and so just out of curiosity cuz then I have a thought cuz I we produce all kinds of t-shirts or swag that put our values on a shirt. Like, I mean, the shirt I'm wearing under this says criticized by creating. It's a Michelangelo. It's one of our core values. Like, don't just take pot shots at culture. Like, write a better book, produce a better film, make better music, start better businesses. So, but I'm curious, like, how have you done that with your teams?
Well, I think it's those sort of things. It's those
Yeah.
values that live the day. So, it's the little things that you say all the time. You do the little things right, big things will happen.
Yeah.
It's something what you just said before. But those little things, those are the things that you instill in your players. Those are the things they'll remember. And it's what they do in the middle of the game. Go, oh, okay, I get that. I had a friend who won the NCAA tournament in golf. He won the U.S. Amateur Pub Links, but his college coach, his golf coach, it was over and over is finish strong, and it was the 18th hole. He
Yeah.
had more birdies on the 18th hole than anybody else. It's because it was finish strong, and
Yeah.
that's what it came. So those are the things that are really important that drive you when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Love it.
One of the things that you talk about here is the brachiostochrome curve. And I think that right there is, from the beginning, it really highlights what gradually then suddenly is and what momentum looks like. And
Yep.
a lot of people love the suddenly, right? We think the
Yep.
dreams are just going to happen. We don't like the gradually, but these are long-term things to get to the suddenly.
Yeah.
Take us through that curve and take us into the place so you can just give us a bigger picture of gradually than suddenly. Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening and thank you for supporting the show. If you'd like to support the show and get early ad-free episodes, you go to Substack at shiftingculture.substack.com, and with your subscription, you could have a private podcast feed in your podcast app where you get to download early episodes before anybody gets to listen to them. You could also support the show by going to the support the show link at the bottom of the show notes in the app that you're using right now. That goes to a page that supports the work my wife and I do around the world. That donation is also tax deductible. So if you want a tax deductible donation, you could go there. Or if you want to support the show by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps new listeners find the show as well. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. And thank you so much for supporting this work so that we could see the body of Christ look more like Jesus.
Yeah. I'm about to record the audiobook and I knew when I put in that curve, I'm like, I'm going to regret it because I'm going to have to say it about 10 times. It's a
No,
mouthful.
it is a
Uh,
mouthful. I had to go look up how to say it. I had to practice it. Like, I'm going to say it once. That was
and I
it. I
think
said it.
you did it better than I can even do it. So, but it is kind of a fun the yes, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but it's not the fastest route. There's actually a curve. And I think there's an application to life that well, I even share the story in the book about the first time I dunked a basketball. It was with a cast on my ankle. And it's because I thought it was a setback, but it was a setup. Like I had to hop around for weeks on end on one leg, and that one leg became so strong after doing that that I was able to literally dunk a basketball with a cast on the other foot. So it's this idea of, listen, sometimes those setbacks are actually a blessing in disguise. But we only tend to see it looking back, not looking forward or in the moment. But the obstacle is not the enemy. The obstacle is the way. You have to kind of fight your way through it. At the end of the day, usually success is well managed failure. So you have to be really, really good at kind of processing that. So I think that curve is just part of life. I mean, if you look at someone like Joseph, for example, I mean, 13 years, it goes from bad to worse. I mean, he's trafficked, sold into slavery by his brothers, ends up in prison on a false accusation. I mean, it is not looking good, but all of it is this incredible setup, and he has the wherewithal. Genesis 50:20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, the saving of many lives. So it's this idea that, listen, simply put, overnight success is an oxymoron. Like, it doesn't exist. It usually is 20 years in the making, as Sam Walton is purported to have said, as it relates to Walmart. But it really is true of everything. The people who really succeed at things love gradually, love. In fact, do you know when John Wooden retired, he was asked what he missed most? And it wasn't the championships, it wasn't hoisting the trophy, it wasn't. He said practice. That's what he missed the most. And that, whether you're a musician or an athlete or an academic, like, there's something to be said there, that it's this intrinsic motivation. You love practicing your craft, whatever that is, and getting better and better at it.
Yeah, he missed telling his players how to put on socks the proper
Yes.
way. that's
Yeah,
that's
right?
that's what he missed.
Yes.
One of the quotes that you have in your book, which goes along with what you just said, is if someone makes something look easy, I can guarantee it isn't. Effortlessness is evidence of extra effort. It's not an easy thing, right? We got to put
Yeah.
some effort into it. For people, when you're thinking about God dreams, I think some people spiritualize their dreams in such a way where they're like, I don't need to put any effort in. This is God's going to do it. And, I'm just going to let God do it. So what do we have to do in the middle of these God dreams? Like, what is
Yeah.
our role and responsibility, and what's God's role and
Right,
responsibility?
right. Well, I think true wisdom has two sides, Job 11:6. And I think you have to pray like it depends on God, but you also have to work like it depends on you. That God has a way of honoring blood, sweat, and tears, that effort matters. I think when you loving God with all of your strength, I take that very literally, that it involves a caloric output. So yesterday, I think I'm training for a bike century. So I biked 45 miles, burned about 4,000 calories. And I feel like I'm loving God with all of my strength when I'm on that bike. Like, literally, I'm using my energy to do something that I think is significant, and there's a way to do that you can glorify God. If scripture says whether you eat or drink, do it all to the glory of God, that tells me kind of everything is on the table. One of my all-time favorite quotes is a Dorothy Sayers, and she said, I dare say that no ill-fitted drawers or crooked table legs ever came out of the carpenter's shop in Nazareth. And it's this idea that long before Jesus was teaching parables or doing miracles, he was crafting furniture. And I've got to think that he crafted beautiful, well made, long lasting furniture. So I just think whatever you're doing, it deserves kind of your best effort. And if someone is pulling shots at a coffee shop, a barista, and you can tell they're putting some effort, putting some love into it, you can tell. I mean, I think it tastes better. We have some friends who are on the garbage truck that come by about once a week, and I was out there with we have one grandson who's just a year old, and he, for him, dump truck or garage or garbage trucks or moving trucks are like the coolest thing on the planet. And we were out there, and he was just waving to him, and you could tell, like, I don't know, like, is that a dream job? Like, kind of getting your hands dirty with garbage. I don't know if that's a dream job, but man, this guy who does it is so nice and so good and has been so gracious to us. I'm like, okay. Like, I think it's doing whatever you do in a way that you understand you're honoring God with your effort.
One of the most impactful funerals I ever went to is a guy who died in his early 50s. He was a forklift driver. There were so many people that came to his funeral, and he made such an impact on people's lives because it was about doing things with excellence and about the people around him. And he poured his life into people while he was doing whatever job he was doing with excellence.
Mm.
And that's what it is. So what's your shirt say? Criticize by
Yeah,
creating,
criticized
right?
by creating.
Criticize by creating. So what are you creating? What what
Yeah.
what is happening through your church or the influence that the church has had that actually sees some creation, that there's some God dreams that are happening?
Yep.
What's going on? What's been created? What is, like, where are we going with this?
Yeah. Well, Washington, D.C. is an interesting place to pastor. I'll say that right out of the gate. But we're not just trying to build a church, we're trying to bless a city. And so, we may be able to touch a few thousand people every weekend, but really it's about doing things to the third and fourth generation. So, a couple of examples, like we bought a crack house and turned it into Ebenezer's Coffee House, and every penny of profit we give to kingdom causes that we care about. And that includes a DC Dream Center, which was an abandoned apartment building, and invested more than $5 million. Mayor came out and cut that ribbon, and it's a place where we're 64 programs run out of that DC Dream Center, because if you want to change a city, you've got to go upstream and start with kids. And so those would be a couple of examples. Just doing things, serving our city, and that could be, listen, cleanup projects to outreaches that, an Easter egg hunt that we do. But it a church that stays within its four walls isn't a church at all. So we've always wanted to kind of be in our city. One of our core convictions is that God will bless us in proportion to how we give to missions and care for the poor in our city. So this year, we'll take 17 mission trips and we'll give $4 million to missions. Now, we weren't doing that 29 years ago. 29 years ago, we gave a $50 check and thought to ourselves, like, we cannot afford this. But we started kind of prioritizing, how do we serve others, and that would include any church that's planted in our city. We want to be financial shareholders in it, because it's not about the name over the church door, it's about the name above all names. So it's kind of this mindset where you're playing the long game. And I think when you play the long game, you realize that, well, for starters, every pastor is an interim pastor. I mean, I've had the joy of serving in a lead role for 29 years, but I'm still an interim pastor, even if I get to do it for 50 years. So it's kind of that mindset of, let's not complain about things. Let's make a difference. So when our city is kind of immigration conversations, and I don't have political or legislative solutions. That's not the hat I wear. But there was a season where we were caring for about 65% of the refugees in the DMV. So, like, I think scripture says care for the stranger, love the stranger. And now I know immediately then people have 7 follow-up questions, and I get it. It's not complicated. But I feel like we want to be more known for what we're for than what we're against. And that means sometimes just letting your feet do some of the talking.
I think that's right. And I think we need to care, and we need to care well. My wife and I work with war refugees for many years in the Middle East. So were there. And I'll give you our dream as we went over to the Middle East. And we said we dreamed that within our lifetime, movements of Muslims following Jesus would sweep across the Arab world, transforming it from within. And that's a big God-sized dream. Like, I can't do
Yes.
that by myself. My wife and I can't do it with each other. We can't do it with one little team. It's going to take God and a spirit moving in ways that are well beyond us.
Yeah.
And one of the things is, the first refugee that came to know Jesus, had a dream of Jesus, was great. A lot of great things happened through her, but it was when her daughter, about 6 years later, came to know Jesus and said, our family as well, and my kids, were going to follow Jesus. And I finally, I just realized that it's not just that one little generation, but it is now the generation that comes after her is affected. And
Mm,
then now that her kids, so the generation after her is affected. And this goes generationally deep and not just wide.
mm,
How can we, you're talking about a long legacy here. How can we have generational thinking? Like, this is
mm.
generational movement. You look all throughout the
Yep.
Bible, things happen generationally and not just in one, setting, but it was generation after generation. What does like having a generational mindset look like? Shifting culture is only possible because people believe these conversations matter. But to keep this show going, we need partners who will invest in it. Advertising on Shifting Culture not only sustains this community, it connects your message with an engaged audience that cares deeply about shaping a better world. If your mission aligns with ours, lifting up stories of hope, justice, creativity in the way of Jesus, then sponsoring this podcast is one of the best ways to make sure these conversations continue to reach thousands each month. If you're interested, email me at jjohnson@shiftingculturepodcast.com or follow the link in the show notes. And if you know someone whose organization should advertise here, please connect us. Together, we can keep this vision alive.
Yeah, I love the question because we're so short-sighted, we're so myopic. We live in news cycles and political cycles, and so our we kind of root our thinking in Jeremiah 29, where the Israelites, Jewish people, are in exile in Babylon. And Hananiah, false prophet, says, you're only going to be there 2 years. Wouldn't that be great? But the problem is if you have a 2-year mindset, you don't even unpack your suitcase. Like, you rent the city, but Jeremiah comes along and says, no, you're going to be there 70 years. So you better plant gardens and build houses. Now, what's interesting is the average lifespan in that time was 35. So 70 years is thinking, out to that second and third generation. And so literally, like, when we bought a city block on Capitol Hill, and I mean, it we didn't have a category for a $29.3 million building, let alone a city block. It was bigger than our vision, but not if you think in terms of 3 and 4 generations. Like, what we realize is that all we're trying to do is set up the next generation. We drink from wells we didn't dig, and so we better dig some wells for the next generation. And so it really is this mindset. And I think, honestly, well, I'll ask you the question. Don't you think it seems like we're getting worse and worse at long-term consequential thinking because time frames have become so shortened that it just seems like we're making decisions kind of based on this quarter's numbers, or this season's win-loss record, instead of that long term. I think there's a question in there somewhere.
Well, I think one of the things you're saying is that time feels like it's been sped up. lately.
Yes.
And so, because we have a barrage of information and we have a new thought and new information coming in all the time, we think, okay, if I respond to that, that'll be fine, and then I have to respond to the next thing. And so it's going to be difficult for us to get out of this barrage of information and this attention economy that we have, that it's all about the attention we give. And if it is an attention economy, then we have to give the attention back to God and give back to God what is God's, which is time. And
Mm,
time, right, emanates
yeah.
from Him. It doesn't emanate from our news feed. It doesn't emanate from our social media feed. It emanates from God. And so that's what we're giving back. And that's where the attention starts to go, is that long-term thing. But that is the difficult thing for people and for all of us, right? We're
Yeah.
just
It's funny, Joshua, because I it would have been easier to write a like I'm trying to think of the opposite of gradually than suddenly. Like it probably would be more popular to write like 2 minutes to financial independence or or 2 days to accomplish your dreams. It's not reality. I just am more and more convinced there are no shortcuts, there aren't any cheat codes. And in fact, the people that experience success too quickly, sometimes there isn't really the character to kind of support that kind of success. And, then what happens is it goes to your head and it kind of blows up your ego. And so I look back on it and yeah, we've had the joy of leading a church for 29 years that God has blessed. But I share the story in the book about our first attempt at church planning was a failure. And it was so embarrassing and disorienting when it happened, but I look back on it and I'm like, "Oh, what a gift. What a gift to experience that kind of failure in my early 20s because then you're not tempted to take credit for things you shouldn't be taking credit for."
in your book, you're talking about this. You're talking about the Order of the Mustard Seed, Count Zinzendorf, the Moravians, what
Yeah.
they're doing, and you make a correlation between the understory of what's happening underneath and then the overstory. And we see this within nature, within forests as well. Trees. You have what's going on up top, but the stuff underneath is really where the magic happens, and the
Yeah.
roots are being formed. And you talk in there that really it's about consecrating ourselves to God is the thing that's going to, propel us into that place. Can you just talk about maybe the Moravians there, Order of the Mustard Seed, and consecration and the importance of consecration?
Yeah. Well, they started 100-year prayer meeting 24/7, and it's hard to calculate kinda all of the cultural impact that had, but pretty profound.
Yes.
So, I think part of what I'm trying to get at there is, like, we need to have long vision, and long vision by definition can't be accomplished in your lifetime. And so how are we dreaming into something that's bigger and longer here? And I'll make it really practical. Like, I think we are so often discouraged or disheartened by news. I mean, take a week, any week, and something happened that's absolutely devastating, a shooting over here or a tragedy over there. And because social media, which is kind of like the tree of knowledge, that I don't think we have the emotional or intellectual capacity to know about everything that's happening all the time everywhere. Like, it just we aren't created that way. And so what happens is we become overwhelmed by the latest headline. And but Joshua, that's the understory. That's the understory. The overstory is the kingdoms of this world are becoming the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ. Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess to the glory of God the Father that Jesus is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. There's no other name under heaven given unto men by which we can be and must be saved. And guess what? Every nation, tribe, people, language will worship around that throne. Come on, church. The day is coming that there will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. You have got to keep locked and loaded on that over story. And that's true of our lives. Like, I mean, we get in our heads and we overthink, whether it's like I had a bad game or we had a bad day as a married couple or anything in between. Like, you can get so locked in that little understory that then you forget kind of the overstory and the big picture. So I think part of gradually then suddenly is let's zoom out, widen the aperture, wide angle lens, get a little bit of perspective. I mean, I even poke at something C.S. Lewis said, that between every new book you read, you better read an old one. Otherwise, you become a captive to the spirit of the age. And so, even in that, like, if we aren't careful, we get trapped in these news cycles, or we get trapped in mindsets or worldviews that are Johnny come lately, instead of really understanding the meta narrative, kind of the grand narrative of scripture from Genesis to Revelation.
It's so important to live into the God story, this meta narrative, and we know it. That really transforms the way that we live in our lives. Mark, if you had one hope for your readers of Gradually, then Suddenly, what hope would you have for your readers?
You know, I would love it if as people are reading the book, that the Spirit would do what the Spirit does and just give God ideas. Like, good ideas are good, but God ideas change the course of history. So I think there are so many inspirational stories that I've drawn tremendous courage and inspiration from. Like, I mean, one of my favorites, how did we not even talk about Amos Alonzo Stagg? You know, the legendary coach, won 2 national championships, coached until he was 98 years old, and was asked the question, like, by a reporter, how he felt about how successful his season was. He says, "Oh, no, no. Ask me in 20 years, because that's when I'll see how my players turned out." I'm hoping that whether you're a coach or an entrepreneur, full-time mom or dad, whatever it is, like your blue collar, your white collar, that doesn't matter. I think it's about understanding that we're a part of something that's bigger and better and longer. And take this to heart: God is always writing a bigger story. I remind myself of that all the time. And so I think it's a book that will encourage long vision, long obedience, and hopefully net a long legacy.
Two quick questions at the end here. I like to ask one: if you go back to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Enjoy the journey. Every age, every stage, enjoy the journey.
It's good. Anything you've been reading or watching lately you could recommend?
Oh my goodness. I have been deep diving AI, both the
Mm.
practitioner side and the theory side, and the unintended consequences or implications of where that could take us.
Yeah.
I'm not a particularly technical guy. In fact, I'll even say I've never used AI to help me do any of my writing, which is kind of mind boggling, because the truth is, are there any students left that aren't using AI to help them with an assignment? But I like reading about the everything from science, astrophysics, to trees, to history, to biography. Just read River of Doubt, another Teddy Roosevelt
Mm.
biography. So I that's a hard question for me, because I have this diet of, like, biography, history, science, and theology. And I just every ology is a branch of theology. So I kind of like putting all of that in the Vitamix, if you will.
That's great. Well, gradually, then suddenly it's out everywhere beginning of November. Mark, this book is fantastic. As you said, there's so many inspirational stories in this book. It is fantastic. I loved going through it. I'm excited to read it again with other people, to invite people to dream and dream God-sized dreams. How would you like to point people to get the book? Is there anywhere they'd like to point people to as well?
Yeah, probably if folks pop over to markbatterson.com, there's a free sample chapter, but then a lot of resources and things that are, I just want to add value.
Yeah.
Whether you get the book or not, you'll find resources there that I think can help you in your spiritual journey, but also in that gradually then suddenly journey. And then I'm on social, Instagram, X, Mark Batterson.
All right. Well, Mark, thank you for this conversation. It was fantastic. Hopefully you're going to go and practice brachistochrome curve, and you could be able to say the word. You'll get it down as you read the audio. But I really enjoyed connecting with you, sharing dreams, and seeing what God could do. So
Love
this is
it.
fantastic. So
Hey, thanks so much, Joshua. God bless.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to this episode of Shifting Culture. This show was edited and produced by me, Joshua Johnson, at Shifting Culture Productions. If you're enjoying the conversations, consider supporting the work by subscribing at shiftingculture.substack.com. For as little as $5 a month, you'll get ad-free early access episodes and other exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox. I'd love for you to not just listen, but engage. Reach out. Share what's resonating, and let's keep shaping culture together. Whether you're a listener with feedback, a creative with an idea, or a brand looking to connect with a thoughtful, engaged audience, let's talk. If you're interested in advertising on the show, I'd love to hear from you. Contact me directly for rates and availability. Until next time, let's keep shifting culture.